Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're really excited that we're going to be able to share with you some of the work that we're doing in Katana 3. Not quite done yet, but we're really excited and we're close enough that we wanted to start sharing with you what's coming up. Because it's 2018 is going to be a big year for Katana. And yeah, why not start talking about it now? Okay. So, as the title says, sneak peek into Katana 3 and rendering workflows in the future. So, we're going to talk about the rendering workflows that are specific to Katana. So, really what this means is we're going to give you a bit of a sneak peek into things that we're thinking about doing. So, as we'd like to say, some of the stuff that's cooking up in the Foundry labs. I'll make it pretty clear which stuff is actually Katana 3, which stuff is going to be something that you might have to wait a little bit longer for, but we're still all really excited and wanted to share with you. All right, so if you guys haven't met me before or haven't been on one of these webinars with me, I'm Jordan Thiswood. I'm the product manager in charge of Katana. We've got a great team that is doing a lot of heavy lifting, hard work, trying to make this the best tool possible for your lighting and look development needs. And without further ado, let's kind of get into the agenda. So first section, the work that we've done in Katana 3 kind of focuses on three main areas. We've done a lot of work in the performance area. So this is going to be an ongoing area of development for Katana. So Katana 3 isn't like the end of the line for that work. We've got some pretty high standards that we want to hit. And the guys have really been digging into every corner. So what I'm really proud of is the team has kind of not just jumped to the finish line. We are really kind of turning over every rock, as it were, and squeezing every little bit of performance into the program as possible. So Katana 3 is a great step forward. And then every release after that is going to have more and more added to it. So we'll go through some of the details of that. And then the next thing that we'll cover is some of the UI improvements. And the UI, it was good, but it had room for improvement. And we've got some talented folks that took it upon themselves to find a nice level of refinement. And we're really happy with the direction it's going. Because it, like with our work that we've done on Mario 4, it opens up the things we can do in the future. And then the thing that those of you who currently use Katana are going to be ecstatic about, just absolutely thrilled with when you get your hands on this, is that Pixar kindly open sourced their Hydra viewport technology as part of the USD project. And with the work that the team at Pixar has been doing on it, it was a natural fit for what we wanted as the sort of viewer technology for Katana. And as you may have seen, Katana 2.6, we released a viewer API. Those of you who have custom viewport technologies, you can plug it into that. But we built on top of that for Katana 3 and are delivering you a new viewer. So we'll get into all the gritty details in just a sec. So one of the areas that the team have done a lot of work with is startup time. Well, it's just in general the performance, but one of the areas that it's affected has been startup time. So this is short enough that it's not too painful to show you guys. So bear with me. It gets more exciting as we go. But for those of you working in facilities with big environments and things like that, this will help you out. So Katana, generally the performance is about going to be about 1.5 times faster. So that was Katana 2.6. Let's now skip forward and take a look at Katana 3. And here we go. So you can see our nice new splash screen, a lit samurai, and there you go. So 1.5 times faster. So it's basically 13 seconds for the old version, 9 seconds for the new version. Performance improvements also affect the actual loading of projects. So made a synthetically large 5,000 node. Now projects range from between 50 nodes to tens of thousands of nodes. So 5,000 is a good happy in between. And you can see that with this, it takes a bit of time. We get the death wheel on Windows, and if you look at the top, we can see that the program's completely locked, and Windows has told us it's not responding. And keep in mind, this is still larger than or loading faster than an equivalent file in another 3D application. For the complexity of the scene, we'll cover all that later. And we're almost there. Almost. And there we go. All right. So that was Katana 2.6. Now let's take a look at Katana 3. All right. So same process, same file, except that it is being saved in Katana 3 so that there's no upgrade process that is sort of entering into the equation. So like for like process, as it were. So no spinning death wheel, no unresponsive program. Just a bit of artist patience. And I'm sorry if we're making your smoke breaks go away, but Katana kind of already did that in general. And if you guys don't know, the thing that really controls the loading time for Katana in terms of project files, it just comes down to how many nodes. And you can see there it's already in. So thank you for bearing with me with those two sort of more numerically based examples. But I hope you can kind of extrapolate that to see that the guy's work in the performance area has been significant. Here we go, guys. So we're in Katana 2.6, looking at a very basic file, obviously. But you can see, benefit of the UI, nice, neutral, gray. You can focus on the images. You're not going to have color bleed, changing your visual perception. If you're working on a color calibrated monitor in a light controlled environment, nothing should really disturb you. Okay, that's fine. But the contrast ratios for the text, the bevels on the boxes, there's a lot of extra visual information that just kind of pulls you away from what you're doing. So what we did with Katana 3, optimized the contrast levels, reduced all the beveling, got rid of the outlines. It's just a nicer, cleaner, sort of an artist take on what we had. Doesn't mean that we're completely done and that over the course of a various few releases that we're not going to be improving it even further. But, just so you have a nice new base level, this is what Katana 3 will look like. And what you're also looking at here is the new Hydra viewer. We'll talk a bit more in detail about this in a second. But one of the fundamental things, your basic transform tools, operational spaces, and what you are working on, object or faces, all there laid out for you so you can get into the information you need. So when you compare this against the old version and look at the difference, a great quote, someone said it was, enough of improvement to improve things, not enough of a change to basically rock the boat. So for those of you who know Katana, it's going to still be familiar. We're not changing all your muscle memory. We're not changing all your visual cues. We're just making it easier for you. So things like the dark backgrounds for the text boxes, things like that. So we hope you enjoy working with this, and we'll continue to refinement. And let's move on and talk about Hydra. All right, so what do we have in front of us? Well, we have a comparison between the OpenScene Graph powered viewer in Katana 2.6 and prior, and a comparison of the Hydra powered viewer on the right hand side. So I'll break it down for you. It's about 7 to 10 times faster than the current viewer in Katana 2.6 and before. So let's take a look at it. All right, so we're not going to play the whole video. We're going to play the part that's relevant, and you'll see why in a second. first thing I want to point out is that it's a much smoother experience tumbling and interacting with things in the Hydra viewer. So shout out to the guys at Pixar. They wrote some lovely tech, and it's been great getting it into Katana. And one of the things that we were happy that it allowed us to do is we had a very talented developer go through and add in ambient occlusion. So one of the many things that we have planned, but Katana 3 will ship with this enabled. And you can just come up to your preferences here, and you can actually just come to the sliders here, or the names of the parameters, and you can change the various settings. Here I'm changing the samples. Honestly, guys, in my testing, much more in 16 doesn't really make sense. So here we go. You know, you can dial your distance up and down. So get your radius tweaked. It stays as a Katana preference, so it doesn't stay resonant with the file. So if you have assets of various different sizes where the radius is going to need to be different, you'll have to change it as you go. But you can imagine that if you're working on assets that are for the same project, they're all going to be in a relative scale, so you're probably okay and won't have to change it too much. But with that turned on, it doesn't really change much. That's why I was saying that, like with the 16 samples, you get all the effects that you need. You can dial in the look. It gives you all the feedback you need to just get that richer sort of relative placement of objects to each other, and you're not really affecting the performance. Kick it up to, you know, anything above, you know, 32, and honestly, total diminishing returns. So yeah, that'll be one of the fun parts of working in Katana 3. Let's move on to the next one. Here we are back in the Hydra powered viewer, and what I want to talk with you about right now is the opportunity that we took, or we had capitalized on, however you want to look at it, to introduce new handles. The old ones were okay. I would call them functional. They did the job. They allow you to move a light and things like that, but they weren't things that you know, no one would say it brought joy to their life. Let's put it that way. So in the Hydra viewer, our design team took the mandate of trying to figure out what is the best way to do these kinds of things. And so what you have now is a nice suite of tools that allows you to move your objects, lights around. You have planar handles, so you can move in particular axes if you are trying to constrain your movements without actually having to use extra keyboard modifiers, which is really cool. When you grab a planar handle, or sorry, an axis handle, you're presented where that object is going. Now, where does that come in handy? Well, when you get something at an odd local rotation, then it gives you an idea of where it's going to track. So this was added by one of our programmers, and it's nice that we sort of have not only our designers contributing and the programmers are adding and plussing everything along the way. Kind of gives you an idea of how passionate everybody is for the project. Right, so translate, rotate handles, nice, easy to work with. Now, the piece de resistance that I think most of you will spend the most time with is going to be what we call our COI manipulator. So let's move a couple things out of the way. And before I get to the COI manipulator, I do want to give you guys something to be happy about. Those of you who have been using Katana for a while will know that there was one quirky limitation that came with the old viewer, and that was you couldn't move more than one thing at a time. Oh, that would made me want to tear my hair out. So here we go. You can move things around. Note that I'm in object space, which is why I'm getting the odd translation there. So if we go to world, you can see everything sticks together nicely, right? So yes, it is a modern world. Katana 3, you can move multiple objects at the same time. We're thrilled. We hope you are thrilled. Now, lights are typically the thing that you spend the most time with. We're not done with the light icons yet, so I'm going to use a camera to show you this. In the previous version of Katana, the way of working with a look at was a little clunky, and we wanted to do better. So what we have is a tool that is this manipulator here, where you have a separate look at from your camera or from your source, right? So if we want this camera to look at that object, let's split our viewer into two, and then let's say that we want this to look through the camera. Right, so we want to frame that guy over there. It's pretty simple. We can take that like so, and then all set. So if you are trying to look through a light and you want to see what's happening, you want to have some kind of precise movements around it, you're all set. You get the nice axis line that basically shows you the direction that the light or the camera is going to be pointing. You have both object and world space. So if I then want to rotate my light, in this case the camera, around the object, that is not a problem, right? So you can do all manner of interactions with this new manipulator. And with the planar handles, it gets pretty cool when you think about being able to say, okay, I want this to move around. In this case, it's going in the object space. Hit S to toggle between the two. And you can just quickly say, okay, you know what? I just want to move this around. And it's going to stay at that height, and it's just going to pan around. So you've got a lot of options for light placement and camera work if you're trying to refine cameras. Maybe you're using them for projections. But all told, between the hotkeys, which are just a standard QWERTY, Q, W, E, R, and T for the COY, S now toggles between object and world. It's a pretty nice set of controls, and we're pretty happy about it. Finally, the future. Dun, dun, dun. Really, the way technology changes is awesome. You look at Alara, and who would have thought that, a couple years ago, you would have a massively scalable platform where you could spin up massive machines that you would have had to buy for several thousand, going on tens of thousands of dollars. That's a sunk cost. Yet as a lighter, you can spin up, a big, giant, beefy machine, use a tool like Katana, instantly spin up a render farm, do your work. I mean, the world is changing, and it's in many awesome ways. So with that, we have to ask ourselves here, what is the best way for artists to actually interact with images? And, let's be honest, Katana is super powerful, but on the artist side, it has room for us to improve that and leapfrog it. But we stand on a foundation of really strong technology and pipeline power. So really it's about wrapping new workflows and opportunities in to basically give you guys better tools. And that's what it's all about. So without further ado, since I haven't actually kind of told you what's in the future, let's jump right into it. All right. There's an interesting possibility that is on the horizon. Like we said, this is all kind of like Foundry Labs prototype stuff. But what if you could actually use any of the rendering plugins and draw the ray tracing directly to the viewer, effectively making the viewer inside of Katana a ray traced one, with the idea being that you interact with those rendered images instead of having to work with a GL. So GL is awesome at what it does well, but it doesn't scale. Ray tracing scales incredibly well. So what you're seeing here, the lag is that we're actually writing the image to disk and then reading it back into the viewer. So if it was actually sharing the memory, it would be going a lot faster. But it does show that there's a really viable, nice, interesting way where if you do have fast enough ray tracing, the ray tracing can be your viewport. And so what we have going on in Skullworks is we want to be able to give you guys in the future a version of Katana where if you're, no matter what rendering plugin you're using, you can use ray tracing as the viewport technology. And it's the ray tracing that you have as your final product. So that is kind of under our mandate of get you on top of the image or working directly with the image as much as possible. Whether you're doing look development or lighting, that is going to be the way that you can basically get to your finish line a lot faster. There's an interesting cross-section of work that always seems to come up. Your job is to do lighting, specifically in the shop pipeline. You get the latest updates from someone else, and they've done the best that they can, but typically it's things like simulation meshes, claw sims that crash through the character. In Katana right now, you would have to take that up to another program, back up the pipeline, go bug your friend, ask them to give you a corrected simulation, or pass it through untouched. Our very smart Modo team have figured out a way to basically share that technology. So a future version of Katana will be able to be delivered with some basic modeling functionality. Now, Katana is never going to replace Modo. It's never going to be a full-blown modeling tool. But there is that degree of fixing UVs when you're in look development, shop production tweaks. You've got one of the things that people keep up bringing up is the dominance of using actual physical geometry as shadow casting objects in a ray tracing world. So imagine being able to actually bend pieces of geometry that are not quite in the right spot. You got a branch that you need to get the right shadow across the character. We want to give you the tools to be able to do that. So in a future version of Katana, you will have access to some kind of modeling tool set. And the thing is that we want to keep it in the spirit of Katana, in other words, node-based and procedural. So you'll be able to chain them together, perform multiple operations. So that way, if you have to make something a little bit more complex, maybe you want to make your own custom cookie or gobo, take a plane, subdivide it, knock out a number of faces, you can do that. In this case, we've just done a simple Boolean and a bevel. It's not going to have much of a real world application, but it shows that the tools work that way. So somewhere in the future, this is coming your way. We've covered we can add modeling tools. We've covered that we can do live rendering to the viewer, or that we've got prototypes under development that will lead to something someday. Hopefully sooner rather than later. And now I can show you things that taking a step back to this Hydra powered viewer. What are the things that probably aren't going to be in the 3.0 V1 that you'll probably have in your hands, not that far down the road. And, for Katana, the new viewer itself is like a huge leap forward. Ambient occlusion is nice. Moving multiple things at the same time, game changing for Katana users. But what else can we do? Well, those smart guys over at Pixar who wrote Hydra put in instancing as a core part of the framework for that engine. So what we're cooking up currently is the ability in Katana to do things like, let's get the ground exposed. And as you guys know, or should know by now, you only see what you expand or what you declare in the viewer column to force it open. So here we've got the ground plane. Now this is a bit of a city setup, and what we're missing is obviously the buildings, things like that, but there's a ton of trees that fill up the hills here. So all of a sudden, with the Hydra Power Viewer, instances just fly onto the screen. Okay. Now these are the bounding boxes, and I mean there are limits to the amount of geometry you can push anywhere at any time. It's still got to be drawn. It's not magic, but certainly you have the ability to pick and interact with instances pretty easily and quickly. So again, let's add in some more. So we've now got, I don't know, a few, 1,000 trees all laid out there, tumble around over the ground plane. We can then come in and say, all right, well, for the city, let's expand. We'll find all the proxies, and there you go. So, and we know there's one level left. And let's get down to that. So all these things are all expanded out. And we can find my sneaky little thing in the middle that's hiding. And let's just open up these guys. So there we go. We should have all the pieces now. And it's still beautifully smooth and fast. I mean, this is just a, it's a quad-core laptop with a Quadro, but it's nothing like the workstations you guys get to work on. All right, and we can then turn on ambient occlusion. And we can dial that in like we saw before. So I can decide, okay, well, let's see, go to my Hydra viewer preferences here. Let's say go back down to 16 samples, and then I can dial this in until I get the right effect. So there we go. We know that that's about the nice scene scale that we need for here. And yeah, you get nice rich detail. But the instant scene, or the potential of the instant scene in the viewport for interacting, gives us this really nice, beautiful crossover. Like, how much do you really need to do in GL? What do you need to do in ray tracing? You can push GL to a new limit. When you reach it, the feature brings in the ray trace viewport. So we're just trying to make sure we got you covered, no matter how big the scenes you're working on now or in the future. Just wanted to let you know that the ambient occlusion is not the sum total of what the GL can be made to do with the Hydra viewport. So in upcoming future releases, you can expect that we'll be pushing the limits and putting more PBR-esque rendering into the GL of the viewport. So like I said, when it came to scalability, you're going to have your choice between instancing and ray tracing in the viewport. And then in future versions of Katana, you're going to be able to choose the level of fidelity that you want to work at. All these things are going to come over time. Like I said, we can't promise the time frames. That's why they're sort of in the Skunkworks Foundry Labs. But Katana 3 onwards is going to be a game changer for those of you who have already joined the Katana community and work with it every day. Those of you who are going to come to it new with fresh eyes, you're joining at the right time. And that kind of wraps up those details.